नेताजी हंसते हंसते जीना, नेताजी हमारे 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 हंसते हंसते जीना हो, नेताजी हमारे हंसते हंसते जीना, हंसते हंसते जीना।
বারান্দায় যে টিভিটা চলে দর্শক তো মিউজিয়াম দেখতে পাবে না, তাই
অফকোর্স চালিয়ে দাও, হ্যাঁ একদম চালিয়ে দাও, আওয়াজ সহ। হ্যাঁ
सबसे ऊंचा है दुनिया में
Jai Hind. The birthday assembly at Netaji Bhawan on the morning of 23rd January is a tradition that goes back 75 years. This year, for the very first time, and hopefully the last, we are compelled to gather in a mostly virtual format with a limited physical audience. It's a pity, of course, not to see the familiar sight, Netaji Bhawan thronged by masses and masses of people on Subhash Chandra Bose's 125th birth anniversary. Nonetheless, I would like to warmly welcome all of you as Director of Netaji Research Bureau from across Kolkata, West Bengal, India, and the world to this very special occasion. A series of major events Netaji Research Bureau had planned for this weekend, 21st to 23rd January, have had to be postponed, but all will be rescheduled over the coming months as a continuous celebration of Netaji's 125th in the run-up to 75 years of independence. These events will be publicized in due course. Netaji Research Bureau's Netaji Award was instituted in 1986 at the initiative of its director, Dr. Shishir Kumar Bose. Its original purpose was to honor men and women who had served or helped India's struggle for freedom under the leadership of Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose. The first recipient, on 23rd January 1986, was General Fujiwara Yuichi of Japan. As a mid-ranking officer of the Imperial Japanese Army, Fujiwara was famously instrumental in the formation of the Indian National Army, the Azad Hind Fauj, in Singapore in 1942. He stayed closely involved with the Azad Hind movement and fought alongside the INA in Manipur in 1944. Fujiwara remained a devoted friend of India all his life and visited Netaji Bhawan many times, especially on 23rd January, between the 1960s and the 1980s. He assisted Shishir and Krishna Bose in their long and hard struggle to preserve and propagate Netaji's legacy through Netaji Research Bureau, and he was their main host on a visit to Japan in 1979. General Fujiwara was honored with the inaugural Netaji Award 1 month before he departed this world. In late February of 1986, a telegram from his family arrived here at Netaji Research Bureau. It read, "Fujiwara returned to Hindustan forever." The award's second recipient was Major General Muhammad Zaman Kiani, the INA's senior-most field officer who commanded the INA 1st Division in the battlefields of India's northeast in 1944. On 23rd January 1987, General Kiani's widow and daughter came to Kolkata from Lahore and received the award from Gyani Zail Singh, the President of India. M.Z. Gyani had passed away in Pakistan in 1981. In the 1990s, the Netaji Award was conferred on freedom fighters of great distinction. In 1992, jointly on the Red Fort III, Shahnawaz Khan, Prem Kumar Saigal, and Gurbaksh Singh Dhillon, and in 1993, on Lakshmi Saigal, formerly Swaminathan, and Janaki Athinahappan, formerly Trevor, the commander and deputy commander, respectively, of the INA's legendary Rani of Jhansi regiment. Last year, on 23rd January 2021, the Netaji Award was conferred posthumously on Abid Hassan, who joined Netaji's struggle in Germany in 1941, accompanied him on the epic submarine voyage from Europe to Asia in 1943, and then served the movement with immense dedication and valor until August 1945. Netaji Research Bureau's Netaji Award has been conferred a total of only 10 times since its inception in 1986. This year, 2022, marks 70 years of the establishment of diplomatic relations in 1952 between the Republic of India and the State of Japan. Today, on Netaji's 125th birth anniversary, Netaji Research Bureau is privileged to offer the Netaji Award to a person who is simultaneously an eminent global statesman, the longest-serving Prime Minister of Japan, a devoted friend of India, and a great admirer of Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, Shinzo Abe. We fondly recall Shinzo Abe's visit to Netaji Bhawan on his first visit to India as Japan's Prime Minister in 2007. You can see Professor Krishna Bose, chairperson of Netaji Research Bureau, presenting a memento to Prime Minister Abe during that visit. It's the historic photograph of Netaji on his way to an audience with the Emperor of Japan in Tokyo in November 1943. May I now ask Mr. Yutaka Nakamura, the Consul General of Japan in Kolkata, to please come up on the dais and receive the Netaji Award 2022 on Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's behalf. Consul General Nakamura. Consul General Nakamura will now read out a message sent to Netaji Research Bureau by Prime Minister Abe. Consul General Nakamura.
Professor Sugata Bose, Chairperson, Netaji Research Bureau, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to express my heartfelt congratulations on the 125th birth anniversary of Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose. I would also like to express my sincere gratitude for the conferment of the Honorable Netaji Award. Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose is a bond that connects the heart of people of Japan and India. I vividly remember my visit to Netaji Bhawan with the guide of the late Mrs. Krishna Bose in 2007. I have strived to promote the Japan-India relations, which is the bilateral relations blessed with the greatest potential for development in the world, through a wide range of discussions with Indian leaders at various occasions, including during the 9 years of my tenure as Prime Minister of Japan. I have many good memories from my visit to several Indian cities, such as Kolkata, Varanasi, and Ahmedabad, in addition to the capital, New Delhi, during my tenure. This year marks the 70th anniversary of the establishment of diplomatic relations between Japan and India. I sincerely hope that our Japan-India special strategic and global partnership will be further strengthened in wide-ranging areas such as political, economic, and cultural fields. And two countries would take a leading role towards peace and prosperity of Indo-Pacific. As former Prime Minister of Japan and in my capacity as a member of House of Representatives, I'm determined to do my utmost to continue contributing to the development of bilateral relations. In closing, I'd like to express my heartfelt wishes for every success of Netaji Bhawan and Netaji Research Bureau, further prosperity of India, and continued development of the Japan-India friendship. Former Prime Minister of Japan, member of House of Representatives, Abe Shinzo.
Thank you, Consul General Nakamura. We will now hear a message from Mr. Satoshi Suzuki, the Ambassador of Japan to India. Ambassador Suzuki.
Professor Sugata Bose, Chairperson of Netaji Research Bureau, Professor Shumantra Bose, Director of Netaji Research Bureau, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. Namaskar and a good morning to you all. I wish to extend my sincere congratulations on the occasion of the 125th anniversary of the birth of Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose. As the COVID-19 protocols prevent me from joining you in person in Kolkata on this memorable occasion, kindly allow me to convey my message through this video. Any talk about India's fight for freedom is incomplete without the reference of Netaji, one of the most prominent and important figures of the time. I congratulate the Netaji Research Bureau for organizing this event to pay respect to the brave freedom fighter and leader who has contributed to unifying the nation and led the national movement for freedom, which India finally attained 75 years ago. That also makes this year special for the country. The year 2022 is also a special year for us, as it marks the 70th anniversary of the establishment of diplomatic relations between Japan and India. Today, Japan and India, as strategic partners, cooperate in a close and multi-layered manner in the Indo-Pacific as well as on the global arena through strong bilateral ties between our two countries. The trust between our two nations has been laid well beyond 70 years of our diplomatic history. We have never forgotten that it was a newly independent India then that extended enormous help to Japan to come back to the international community after World War II. Whether it was Swami Vivekananda, Rabindranath Tagore, Justice Radha Vinod Pal, many great Indians, notably from Bengal, had been associated with then Japanese intellectuals and had played a large role in building modern India-Japan relations. Undoubtedly, Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose was one of the persons who marked a new chapter in the history of the two nations. Netaji is one of the most revered freedom fighters of India. His ardent passion and charismatic personality made him one of the most memorable Indians among the Japanese citizens. It was in 1943 that Netaji arrived in Japan through a long trip from Germany, and then he succeeded from Bihari Bose, the Indian Independence League, and the Commander-in-Chief of Indian National Army, INA. Netaji organized the INA with thousands of young Indians, men and women, Hindus, Muslims, Christians, and Sikhs, all equally joined to form the army for the cause of India's independence. In this regard, I would like to narrate about a person from a biography that is widely read in Japan. There was an Indian lady. Her name was Bharati Asha Sahai Chaudhary, also known as Asako in Japan. She was born in Kobe, Japan in 1928 as a daughter of Anand Mohan Sahai, who served as a cabinet minister of the Provisional Government of Free India. Asha was also one of the devoted patriots inspired by Netaji. Netaji opened opportunities to all Indian patriots, including young ladies like her, to join the INA for India's independence. National movement forged the unity of this diverse land. It brought people of diverse faiths, diverse creeds, diverse languages together, and then fought for the freedom of the motherland. Netaji and his INA set a wonderful precedent for comprehensive unity and religious harmony to the independent India in the later days. Netaji said, "One individual may die for an idea, but that idea will, after his death, incarnate itself in 1,000 lives." After 75 years of its independence, his inspiration seems to be still vivid among the people in India and even among foreigners like us. Former Prime Minister Abe is also the one inspired by Netaji. On his visit to the memorial in Kolkata in August 2007, he said, "The Japanese are deeply moved by Bose's strong will to have led the Indian independence movement from the British rule. Netaji is a much respected name in Japan." Netaji and the many Indians who stood up for the beliefs to liberate India evoke a feeling of great respect in many Japanese, including myself. I would like to reiterate our respect for all the steps that two nations have taken together since then, and for the path we will walk together from now. Before I conclude, I'd like to mention that the theme of the 70th anniversary of the establishment of Japan-India diplomatic relations is building a future for our centenary. Let us pass on the blessed relationship of both nations we received from our predecessors to the young next generations. I hope that all of you present at this event today, and even many more, will join our journey in further strengthening the Japan-India relationship. Thank you very much. Namaskar.
I said 15 minutes ago that I was missing the crowds, but the driveway seems to be becoming more and more crowded. Shinzo Abe, presented with the Netaji Award 2022 for his outstanding commitment to the friendship of Japan and India, a friendship which is a glorious legacy of the final climactic struggle for India's freedom waged under the leadership of Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose. We wish to thank Kamal Mondal, the sculptor of the bronze relief of Subhash Chandra Bose, which adorns the Netaji Award, and Colonel Deepak Kumar Dotto, whose firm has crafted this beautiful Netaji Award of 2022. Last month, December 2021, was the 50th anniversary of a historic event, the birth of Bangladesh, in December 1971. Not many people know that for many months in 1971, this house, Netaji Bhawan, was a center of activity in support of Bangladesh's struggle for freedom and a hub of freedom fighters. Krishna Bose, among others, worked tirelessly to support the Bangladesh freedom struggle, along with such persons as the famous revolutionary fighter Bina Bhomik, formerly Bina Dash, the daughter of Netaji's schoolteacher and early inspiration, Beni Madhop Dash. And along with his medical colleagues, Dr. Shishir Bose set up a Netaji field hospital in Bokchora, a place on the Bonga border, where Sikh refugees and wounded Muktijodhas received life-saving treatment, including complex surgeries. In 2012, the government of Bangladesh posthumously honored Dr. Shishir Kumar Bose for his contribution to Bangladesh's freedom. Mrs. Krishna Bose received the award in Dhaka from the hands of Sheikh Hasina, Prime Minister of Bangladesh. And just 3.5 years ago, in mid-2018, Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina herself visited Netaji Bhawan, accompanied by her sister, Sheikh Rehana. Bangabandhu returned to liberated Bangladesh on January 10th, 1972. On January 17th, 1972, Dr. Shishir Bose met Bangabandhu in Dhaka. It was a deeply emotional meeting for both of them. Dr. Shishir Bose personally drove an ambulance used by the Netaji Field Hospital to Dhaka. As you know, he was a good driver. For Netaji's 75th birth anniversary, on 23rd January 1972, Bangabandhu recorded an audio message which was brought to Kolkata by Srimati Nilima Ibrahim. The message was broadcast to the packed gathering right here on the morning of 23rd January 1972. This is the message. Netaji Research Bureau, Netaji Bhavane, Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahmaner নিজ কণ্ঠে প্রেরিত বার্তা 23 জানুয়ারি 1972। ভারতবর্ষের স্বাধীনতা সংগ্রামের পুরোধা, জাতীয়তাবাদ আন্দোলনের জ্বলন্ত প্রতীক নেতাজি সুভাষচন্দ্র বসুর জন্মবার্ষিকীতে আমরা তাকে পরম শ্রদ্ধা ভরে স্মরণ করি। স্বাধীনতা আন্দোলনে নেতাজির ত্যাগ ও তিতিক্ষার আদর্শ চিরকালের জন্য বিশ্বের সকল মুক্তিকামী মানুষের চলার পথে পাথেয় হয়ে থাকবে। তিনি আজ নেই, কিন্তু যে প্রদীপের আলো তিনি ছড়িয়ে দিয়ে গেছেন তাতে মুক্তি সংগ্রামের পথ উদ্ভাসিত। তিনি অমর ও অক্ষয়, প্রদীপ্ত ভাস্করের মতো বিশ্বের মাঝে বেঁচে রয়েছেন। জয় বাংলা। And now in an English translation. On his birth anniversary, we remember Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, the leader of India's struggle for freedom, the blazing embodiment of nationalism, with the deepest respect. Netaji's example of courage and sacrifice in the cause of freedom will, for eternity, be an inspiration to the struggle of all freedom-seeking peoples of this world. Today, he is no more. But the burning flame he has left lights up the path of freedom fighters. He is immortal and irreducible. He lives on like the flaming sun that illuminates the world. Joy Bangla. You will now hear, exactly 50 years later to the day, the tribute to Netaji in Sheikh Mujibur Rahman's own voice. The photograph you see shows Shishir Bose with Mujibur Rahman in his Dhanmondi residence in Dhaka on January 17th, 1972.
ভারতবর্ষের স্বাধীনতা সংগ্রামের প্রধা, জাতীয়বাদ আন্দোলনের চলন্ত প্রতীক নেতাজি সুভাষচন্দ্র বসুর জন্মবার্ষিকীতে আমরা তাকে পরম শ্রদ্ধাভরে স্মরণ করি। স্বাধীনতা আন্দোলনে নেতাজির ত্যাগ ও তিতিক্ষার আদর্শ চিরকালের জন্য বিশ্বের সকল মুক্তিকামী মানুষের চলার পথে পাথর হয়ে থাকবে। তিনি আজ নেই, কিন্তু যে প্রদীপের আলো তিনি ছড়িয়ে দিয়ে গেছেন তাতে মুক্তি সংগ্রামের পথ উদ্ভাসিত। তিনি অমর ও অক্ষয়, প্রদীপ্ত ভাস্করের মতো বিশ্বের মাঝে বেঁচে রয়েছেন। জয় বাংলা।
The crowning achievement of Netaji Research Bureau's publishing program, which began 60 years ago, is the Netaji Collected Works, published in 12 volumes and available in English, Bengali, Hindi, and other Indian languages. Today, we are proud to release new editions of 3 of those volumes. Volume 3 in Burmese prisons, Volume 11, Azad Hind, and Volume 12, Chalo Delhi. Next, we have the 125th birth anniversary edition of NRB's journal, our in-house journal, The Oracle, which started publication on 23rd January 1979 under the editorship of Dr. Shishir Bose. The cover of this very, very special edition of The Oracle shows Netaji in snowy Bad Gastein in Austria in December 1937, and it has much precious material within its covers, as always. On 23rd January 1975, Netaji Research Bureau published a collection of Bengali poetry edited by Krishna Bose, titled Bir Bandana, Hail the Hero. The poets whose works on Netaji feature in this amazing collection include Rabindranath Tagore, his Deshanayak eulogy of 1939, Dilip Kumar Roy, Netaji's close friend, whose own 125th birthday was just yesterday, January 22nd, the Japanese poet Yone Noguchi, the English poet Edward Farley Oaten of 1916 Presidency College fame, Premendra Mitro, Bonopul, Omio Chakraborty, Narendra Deb, and Kaji Abdul Wadud, among many others. 47 years later, Netaji Research Bureau is proud to publish a new edition, a brand new edition of this timeless volume, Bir Bandana. Finally, we are delighted to release, on the occasion of Netaji's 125th, an entirely new volume called Netaji, A Life in Pictures. Most of you know of Netaji, A Pictorial Biography, that landmark volume edited by Shishir Kumar Bose and first published in 1979, which is still massively popular 4 decades later. Netaji, A Pictorial Biography, depicts Netaji's life through over 500 historic photographs and key documents. Well, for Netaji's 125th and the 75th anniversary of independence, Netaji Research Bureau collaborated with the Publications Division of the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting of the Government of India to bring out a worthy successor and supplement to the ever-popular pictorial biography. Netaji, A Life in Pictures, depicts Subhash Chandra Bose's life through over 200 photographs and key documents. This beautiful volume contains some of the classic images of Netaji and his life of struggle, but also many images that have been found more recently, since the 1980s. Netaji Research Bureau provided the content from our archives, and the Publications Division, led by its Director General, Srimati Monideepa Mukherjee, produced this volume. All the books released today are available in Netaji Research Bureau's bookshop, located at the front end of the historic driveway of this house. I had undertaken to say a few words on Mrs. Krishna Bose. Last 23rd January, there was such a hullabaloo here that we couldn't remember her properly. I mentioned that Netaji Research Bureau's publishing program, essential to disseminate Netaji's life and ideals to the world, began 60 years ago. Dr. Shishir Bose also opened the Netaji Museum on the first and second floors of this house 60 years ago in 1961. 6 decades was also the period of time Professor Krishna Bose, chairperson of Netaji Research Bureau from 2000 until her death in 2020 at 89 years of age, spent researching, writing, and broadcasting 6 decades about Netaji's life of struggle. In a journey of discovery she undertook in partnership with her husband. We lost Krishna Bose suddenly 23 months ago. It will be 2 years in a month's time that she suddenly left us. That empty chair in the middle of the dais is permanently reserved for her. Krishna Bose lives on through the seminal books Itihasher Shandhane, Choronorekha Tabo, Proshango Subhash Chandra, that she published in Bengali on Netaji and his life of struggle. Children, meanwhile, read her book Chotode Netaji, means Netaji for kids, which she wrote in 2018, quite recently, and its English counterpart, Netaji, A Biography for the Young, has been popular across India since its first appearance in 1995. A few months ago, an omnibus Bengali anthology of more than 100 of her articles and essays on very diverse topics and themes, written over 70 years, was published as Krishna Bose Prabandha Sangraha, or Collected Essays, 1951 to 2020, and the volume was ceremonially released right here at Netaji Bhawan 4 weeks ago on her 91st birthday, 26 December 2021. That anthology includes about 25 of her articles on various aspects of Netaji's life, which she wrote between 1962, the first article, and 2020, the last article. Krishna Bose was a pioneer of serious, substantive research on Netaji's life of struggle. Over the decades, as a quiet, dedicated worker of Netaji Research Bureau, she gained an intimate personal familiarity with both the important people, for example, almost all of the leading INA officers, and the important places, from Singapore and Taipei to Vienna and Prague, in Netaji's life. I'm very happy to announce today, on Netaji's 125th birth anniversary, that a book of 18 of her most important articles on Netaji, mostly published in Bengali over 6 decades, will be published by a leading English language publisher in a few months' time. I have done the compiling and the translations. This volume, Krishna Bose, Netaji and Azad Hind, Essays on Subhash Chandra Bose's life, politics, and struggle, will at long last make Krishna Bose's corpus of work on Netaji accessible in the global language, English. It should have happened long ago, and preferably not posthumously, but better late than never. In recent years, unfortunately, there is a growing trend of frauds and charlatans posing as Netaji researchers, peddling outlandish and outrageous junk about Netaji. That makes it all the more important to bring Krishna Bose's work to the vast English-reading public, and especially the younger generations of Indians who are so eager to receive authentic information and knowledge about Netaji and his life of struggle. In conclusion, I would like to relate to you Krishna Bose's last conversation with Netaji's life partner, Emilie Schenkel, shortly before Emilie passed away in 1996. Both Krishna and Shishir Bose had a very close bond with Emilie, whom we called Auntie. Emilie, then 85, was keeping poor health and had been temporarily admitted to a nursing home in Bavaria, Germany. Concerned, Krishna called her up in the nursing home. Concerned, Krishna called her up in the nursing home. Krishna has recounted the conversation in her book Emilie and Subhash, A True Love Story, published in English in 2016, Bengali in 2017, and Hindi in 2020. In Krishna Bose's words, I called her up in her room in the nursing home. This is in early 1996. She sounded feeble and distressed. When she heard my voice, she said, Krishna, I want to thank you. I did not understand. I tried to remember if I had sent any present for her lately, as I did from time to time, but I could not remember sending anything of late. Then she said again, I thank you and Shishir for all that you did. My heart sank. I replied, Auntie, Shishir and I will come and see you soon. She repeated, thank you for all that you did. January 2022 marks the centenary, 100 years, of the poem Bidrohi by Kazi Nazrul Islam. May I now invite Srimati Brototi Bandopadhyay to come up on the dais and recite that celebrated poem for all of us.
এলগিন রোডের এই বাড়ি থেকে তুমি চলে যাবার পর ৮১টা শীত বর্ষা গ্রীষ্ম উধাও। এখনো প্রতি জানুয়ারিতে তোমার নশ্বর পায়ের ছাপ। তোমার গন্তব্য ছিল স্বাধীনতা, তোমার পথ ছিল স্বাধীনতা, তোমার প্রেম ছিল স্বাধীনতা। স্বাধীনতা সংগ্রামের সেই অগ্নিপুরুষকে, নেতাজি সুভাষচন্দ্র বসুকে আমার শ্রদ্ধা। ইতিহাসের পাতা থেকে বেরিয়ে আসে সব আশ্চর্য তথ্য। কাজী নজরুল ইসলাম এবং নেতাজি সুভাষচন্দ্র বসু প্রায় সমসাময়িক। একজন 1897 আর একজন 1899। পরস্পরের গভীর অনুরাগী ছিলেন তাঁরা। কাজী নজরুলের এক সংবর্ধনা সভায় নেতাজি বলেছিলেন, যুদ্ধক্ষেত্রে যেমন আমরা নজরুলের গান গাই, কারাগারের ভেতরেও আমরা নজরুলের গান গাই। 1921 ডিসেম্বরের শেষ সপ্তাহে কাজী নজরুল 3/4C তারাতলা রোডের বাড়িতে বসে লিখলেন বিদ্রোহী কবিতা। মাঝরাতে ঘুম থেকে উঠে বসে লিখতে শুরু করলেন। ভোর রাতে সেই লেখা শেষ হলো। শোনালেন তাঁর রুমমেট মুজাফফর আহমেদকে। সেই কবিতা প্রথম প্রকাশিত হয় 1922 জানুয়ারির 6 তারিখে বিজলী পত্রিকায়। আশ্চর্যজনকভাবে ইতিহাস মিলিয়ে দিয়েছে দুই মহাপুরুষকে। একজনের জন্মবার্ষিকীর 125তম বছর, আর একজনের এক ঐতিহাসিক কবিতার 100 বছর। সেই বিদ্রোহী কবিতার একটি নির্বাচিত অংশ আমি শোনাচ্ছি। বলবীর বল উন্নত মম শির, শির নেহারি আমারি নত শির ওই শিখর হিমাদ্রি। বলবীর বল মহাবিশ্বের মহাকাশ ফাড়ি, চন্দ্র সূর্য গ্রহ তারা ছাড়ি, দুলোক ভুলোক গোলক ভেদিয়া, খোদার আসন আরশ ছেদিয়া, উঠিয়াছি চির বিস্ময় আমি বিশ্ববিধাত্রীর। মম ললাটে রুদ্র ভগবান, জলে রাজ রাজ টিকা দীপ্ত জয়শ্রীর। বলবীর আমি চির উন্নত শির, আমি চির দুর্দম দুর্বিনীত নৃশংস, মহাপ্রলয়ের আমি নটরাজ, আমি সাইক্লোন, আমি ধ্বংস, আমি মহাভয়, আমি অভিশাপ পৃথ্বী, আমি দুর্বার, আমি ভেঙে করি সব চুরমার। আমি অনিয়ম উচ্ছৃঙ্খল, আমি দলে যাই যত বন্ধন, যত নিয়ম কানুন শৃঙ্খল। আমি মানি না কোনো আইন, আমি ভরা তরি করি ভরা ডুবি, আমি টর্পেডো, আমি ভীম ভাসমান মাইন। আমি ধৈর্যটি, আমি এলোকে সে ঝড় অকাল বৈশাখীর। আমি বিদ্রোহী, আমি বিদ্রোহী সুত বিশ্ববিধাত্রীর। বলবীর আমি চির উন্নত শির, আমি ঝঞ্ঝা, আমি ঘূর্ণি, আমি পথ সম্মুখে যাহা পাই যাই চূর্ণি। আমি নৃত্য পাগল ছন্দ, আমি আপনার তালে নেচে যাই, আমি মুক্ত জীবনানন্দ। আমি হাম্বীর, আমি ছায়ানট, আমি হিন্দোল, আমি চলচঞ্চল ঠমকি ছমকি, পথে যেতে যেতে চকিতে চমকি, ফিং দিয়া দি তিন্দোল। আমি চপলা চপল হিন্দোল, আমি তাই করি ভাই যখন চাহে মন যা, করি শত্রুর সাথে গলাগলি, ধরি মৃত্যুর সাথে পাঞ্জা। আমি উন্মাদ, আমি ঝঞ্ঝা, আমি মহামারী, আমি ভীতিয়ে ধরিত্রীর। আমি শাসন ত্রাসন সংহার, আমি উষ্ণ চির অধীর। বলবীর আমি চির উন্নত শির, আমি বন্ধন হারা কুমারীর বেণী, তন্নি নয়নে বহ্নি। আমি ষোড়শীর হৃদি সরসিজ প্রেম উদ্দাম, আমি ধন্যী, আমি উন্মন মৌন উদাসীর। আমি বিধবার বুকে ক্রন্দন শ্বাস, হাহুতাস আমি হুতাশীর। আমি বঞ্চিত ব্যথা পথবাসী, চিরগৃহহারা যত পথিকের। আমি অবমানিতের মরম বেদনা, বিষ জ্বালা প্রিয় লাঞ্ছিত বুকে গতি ফের। আমি অভিমানী চিরক্ষুব্ধ হিয়ার, কাতরতা ব্যথা শুনিবীর। চিতচুম্বন চোর কম্পন আমি, থর 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 প্রথম পরশ কুমারীর। আমি গোপন প্রিয়ার চকিত চাহনি, ছল করে দেখা অনুক্ষণ। আমি চপল মেয়ের ভালোবাসা, তার কাঁকন চুড়ির কনকন। আমি চির শিশু চির কিশোর, আমি যৌবন ভীতু পল্লী বালার আচর কাঁচলিনী চোর। আমি উত্তর বায়ুমলয়ে অনিল, উদাস পুরবী হাওয়া। আমি পথিক কবির গভীর রাগিনী, বেনুবিনে গান গাওয়া। আমি আকুল নিদাঘতি আশা, আমি রৌদ্র রুদ্র রবি। আমি মরুণীর ঝড় ঝড় ঝড়, আমি শ্যামলিমা ছায়া ছবি। আমি তুরি আনন্দে ছুটে চলি, একি উন্মাদ আমি উন্মাদ। আমি সহসা আমারে চিনেছি আমার, খুলিয়া গিয়াছে সব বাঁক। মহাবিদ্রোহীর অনুক্লান্ত, আমি সেই দিন হব শান্ত, যবে উৎপীড়িতের ক্রন্দন রোল আকাশে বাতাসে ধ্বনিবে না। অত্যাচারীর খড়গ কৃপান ভীমের রণভূমে রণিবে না। বিদ্রোহীর অনুক্লান্ত, আমি সেই দিন হব শান্ত। আমি বিদ্রোহী ভৃগু, ভগবান বুকে এঁকে দিই পদচিহ্ন। আমি স্রষ্টা সুদন শোকতাপহানা খেয়ালি বিধির বক্ষ করিব ভিন্ন। আমি বিদ্রোহী ভৃগু ভগবান বুকে এঁকে দেব পদচিহ্ন। আমি খেয়ালি বিধির বক্ষ করিব ভিন্ন। আমি চির বিদ্রোহী বীর, আমি বিশ্ব ছাড়ায়ে উঠিয়াছি একা চির উন্নত শির।
We have a token of appreciation for Brototi Bandopadhyay, the poetry collection Bir Bandana and Emilie O Subhash by Krishna Bose. On that rousing note, Professor Sugata Bose, chairperson of Netaji Research Bureau, will now speak on Netaji and Japan.
Friends from across the world. In March 1967, as a 10-year-old, I was witness to a solemn ceremony held exactly at this venue. The atmosphere was electric as the Indian Army Band played Sare Jahan Se Acha Ye Hindustan Hamara. As the roll of drums subsided into silence, General Fujiwara Iwaichi of Japan presented Netaji's sword to Dr. Shishir Kumar Bose. The writing on the original wooden box read Haja Kensho, which means destroy evil and establish justice. On the occasion of the homecoming of Netaji's sword, Shishir Kumar Bose said, "Let us remember that the blood of Japanese and Indian youth mingled freely on the hills and ravines of India's northeast frontier, so that India and Asia may be liberated once and for all from the shackles of Western imperialism. That common blood sacrifice, more than anything else, has forged an indissoluble unity and friendship among the Japanese and the Indian peoples. Let us record on this momentous occasion what we as a state and as a people have neglected to do in adequate measure for too long. Let us record our gratitude to the people of Japan for the wonderful support they gave to India's freedom fighters and the honor they did to our leader during the crucial phase, the final phase of our battle for freedom." Bengal's Governor Padmaja Naidu added, "I would like to request General Fujiwara, who has so graciously come to India to present this sword to the Netaji Museum, to convey to the people of Japan our gratitude not only for this gift, but for all other gifts they have given to our fight for independence." In presenting the Netaji Award today to Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, we have reaffirmed the bond between India and Japan. As S.A. Iyer put it at the sword ceremony, Netaji Research Bureau is not probing into a dead past, but is engaging in projecting a dynamic past into the living present and the potential future. On April 28, 1943, Netaji's aide Abid Hassan had felt something akin to a homecoming when he and his leader transferred in a rubber boat from a German to a Japanese submarine in the Indian Ocean on their 90-day voyage from Europe to Asia. Immediately we had that feeling, he recalled decades later. Netaji had that feeling. The Germans, he explained, were very friendly, very courteous, but we did feel that we had come back to an Asian nation. The warmth of Japanese hospitality and the food spiced with Indian ingredients sourced from Penang were entirely to their liking. From Sabang in Sumatra, where their submarine had docked, Netaji and Abid Hassan flew to Japan in early May 1943. After meetings with poets and professors, generals and admirals, including Generals Arisue and Sugiyama, and the foreign minister Mamoru Shigemitsu, Netaji finally had a face-to-face meeting with Hideki Tojo on June 10, 1943. The magic of Bose, Joyce Lebra writes, enchanted Tojo immediately. With Netaji watching as a special guest, the Japanese premier declared his country's firm resolve to do everything possible to help Indian independence in a speech to the Diet on June 16, 1943. Speaking to 60 journalists on June 19th in Tokyo, Netaji spoke about reviving ancient cultural ties between India and Japan that had been interrupted because of the British domination of India. Yona Noguchi, who had known Binoy Kumar Sharkar and Rabindranath Tagore since the 1910s, now met Netaji and was deeply impressed. On June 20th, 1943, he composed a poem addressed to Subhash Chandra Bose, which is published in Bir Bandana. The next day, Indians in Southeast Asia heard Netaji's stirring broadcast calling upon all patriotic Indians to advance towards the field of battle. Only when the blood of freedom-loving Indians begins to flow, he declared, will India attain her freedom. Accompanied by the veteran revolutionary Rashbihari Bose, Subhash Chandra Bose and Abid Hassan arrived in Singapore on July 2nd, 1943. On July 4th, Rashbihari offered Subhash as his present to the enthusiastic assembly of Indians in the Cathay Theatre. Accepting the leadership of the Indian independence movement in Southeast and East Asia, Netaji offered those who were prepared to follow him nothing but hunger, thirst, privation, forced marches, and death, until they held their victory parade at the Red Fort of Delhi. The following morning, July 5th, on the expansive green in front of Singapore's municipal building with its Corinthian columns, Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose took the salute as Supreme Commander of the Indian National Army. And he gave the war cry, Chalo Delhi. Expatriate Indians, soldiers and civilians alike responded with great emotional fervor to his call for total mobilization. Subhash Chandra Bose was a man you could not forget once you knew him. So wrote the Burmese leader Barmore. His greatness was manifest. He saw Netaji as a symbol of the long and passionate Indian revolution that had at last found its way into the wider Asian revolution, which could change Asia. Having galvanized Indian expatriate communities in Malaya, Thailand, and Burma between July and October, Netaji proclaimed the formation of the Azad Hind government in Singapore on October 21st, 1943. Once the Japanese government, at a cabinet meeting on October 23rd, granted recognition to the Free India government, the stage was set for his participation at the Greater East Asia Conference to be held in Tokyo on November 5th, 6th, 1943. The leaders of the Asian countries invited to the conference arrived as chrysanthemum flowers bloomed in Tokyo. Subhash Chandra Bose was hosted by the family of Shibusawa Shakuro, the head of Japan's central bank, whose father had pioneered the financial reforms of the Meiji era. Gazing at the Shingawa Gulf from the Shibusawa home in Shiba, Netaji reflected on the achievements of Meiji Japan and its 1905 victory. On November 3rd, he visited the Meiji Shrine to pay his respects on the anniversary of the adoption of the Meiji Constitution. Netaji had come as an observer, according to the Japanese Foreign Ministry's record, because he was of the opinion that India would not join the Greater East Asia co-prosperity sphere. Japanese opinion also concurred with his. Before the conference began, he made sure paintings and poetry that had helped forge bonds between India and Japan since the turn of the 20th century would figure prominently on his itinerary. He was deeply conscious of the friendship between Rabindranath and Okakura, as well as Obunindranath and Taikkan. Netaji visited the Ueno Museum of Art with Anand Mohan Sahai and Abid Hassan. Having learned that his war cry, Chalo Delhi, had inspired the composition of a Japanese song by Yon Noguchi for NHK, he asked for and received an English translation of the song Marching to Delhi. The first verse of this song poem, in 4 verses, visualized a freedom feast in a land ravaged by famine. On November 5th, 1943, the Assembly of the Greater East Asiatic Nations formally convened in the Japanese Diet. Subhash Chandra Bose rose to speak on the afternoon of November 6th, 1943. The force of his delivery, the Japanese record noted, compelled every member of the conference to pay attention to every phrase of his speech. A Cambridge-educated interpreter and diplomat, Masayoshi Kakitsubo, who had visited India in the mid-1930s and gave the Netaji oration here in 1977, was given the task of translating Netaji's speech. Krishna Bose writes in her book, Charonarekhatabo, that decades later, Kakitsubo remembered being moved to tears as he rendered Netaji's English speech into Japanese. Surveying the long history of international conferences, Netaji recalled his own futile attempts to get a hearing for the cause of Indian independence before the League of Nations. It was the Indian inability to distinguish between false and real universalism, Netaji argued, that had led India to succumb to European power. But India had learned through misery and humiliation that true internationalism was rooted in nationalism. The first step towards the creation of an international society was to set up regional federations. He expressed his determination to fight till the bitter end, no matter what the suffering and sacrifice involved may prove to be, certain of India's ultimate victory. I do not know, he said, how many of us who are going to participate in the coming battle will survive to see India free. But whether we survive or not, whether we individually live to see India free or not, we are confident that India shall be free. The Japanese government responded by announcing the de jure transfer of the Andaman and Nicobar Islands to the Azad Hind government. The Asian leaders took their message beyond the conference halls to the mass rally held in Hibiya Park. Subhash Chandra Bose was given an audience by the Emperor of Japan in the Phoenix Hall of the Imperial Palace on November 10th, 1943. Subhash called on Rashbihari Bose at his home, and together they attended a luncheon in his honor given by Mitsuru Toyama on November 15th. Netaji visited the 45 young cadets at the Tokyo Military Academy, and like a mother, he showered his heartfelt affection on them. By the time Netaji said goodbye to the Shibusawa family, leaving with them his presents, including the ceremonial samurai sword that is now at Netaji Bhawan, he had clearly endeared himself to his Japanese hosts and left a lasting impression on them. Netaji arrived in Nanjing on November 18, 1943, proceeding immediately to pay his homage at the mausoleum of Sun Yat-sen. On the night of November 20th, 1943, Netaji gave a 40-minute radio address to the Chungking government and the Chinese people. It contained a lengthy autobiographical account of the ways in which he studied the ideas of Sun Yat-sen and the history of China's Republican Revolution. He paid glowing tributes to Sun as a friend of India, a firm supporter of Indian independence, and a strong opponent of British imperialism. Sun was also a sincere believer in the liberation of Asia and in Asian unity. Following in the footsteps of three great men, C.R. Das, a great Indian leader, Sun Yat-sen, and Okakura of Japan, he declared, "I am seized and inspired by the idea of Pan-Asian Federation." Asia needed to pursue the twin values of liberation and unity, he argued. The building blocks of Asian liberation and unity were the unity of China and the freedom of India, which in turn would make the liberation of the oppressed peoples of West Asia possible. On November 21st, Netaji traveled from Nanjing to Shanghai and galvanized support for his Indian National Army. He issued a second appeal to Chungking, urging Chiang Kai-shek not to fight against India's Army of Liberation. He recalled how, as president of the Indian National Congress in 1938, he had sent an Indian medical mission to China. The mission had set off from this very house. And he insisted that the Indian people really sympathize with China and the Chinese people. Every Indian should be true to the cause of India, he insisted, and likewise every Chinese should be true to the cause of China. How to reconcile these patriotic allegiances with the larger aim of Asian unity was the severe challenge that wartime Asian leaders faced. Chiang Kai-shek had been rebuffed by Gandhi in 1942 when he had visited India on the eve of the Mahatma's Quit India movement as an advocate of Britain and the United States. Netaji reckoned in November 1943 that China would achieve unity under one leader and that by an honorable peace, Japan would withdraw her troops from China. He cited Mahatma Gandhi's statement in 1942 that if India were free, he would have gone on a mission to bring peace between China and Japan. Netaji asked Abid Hassan to stay on in China for a while to negotiate an understanding with the Chungking government, but to no avail. From China, Netaji flew on November 22, 1943, to the Philippines, whose leaders had blazed the trail to Japan since the days of José Rizal. One beautiful day in November 1943, an eyewitness recounted, Bose went to Luneta Park on Manila Beach to present a wreath at the famous statue of José Rizal. He gazed silently at the statue of Rizal for several long, tense minutes as the flag of Azad Hind, adorned with the charkha, fluttered in the morning breeze, and the flowers presented by Bose at the feet of the big statue made the whole scene extremely colorful. President José Laurel welcomed Subhash Chandra Bose in Manila as the leader of 350 million Indians in their effort, which is legitimate and divine, to free themselves from the British rule. In early January 1944, Netaji moved forward the headquarters of his Azad Hind government from Singapore to Rangoon in preparation for taking the War of Independence onto Indian soil. The war against the British forces began on the Arakan front in February, and with Chalo Delhi as their slogan, the Indian National Army crossed the Indo-Burma frontier on March 18, 1944, towards Imphal and Kohima. High hopes of capturing Imphal in April 1944 were dashed as American air support came to the aid of besieged British ground forces. The INA and their Japanese allies were forced to retreat beginning July 1944, even though the INA continued to fight rearguard battles against the British advance into Burma until April 1945. In the autumn of 1944, information trickled down unofficially from Japan that the Japanese government was desirous of conferring a title, Order of the Rising Sun of the First Merit, on Subhash Bose. His reply to this shocked the Japanese authorities not a little. Prem Kumar Saigal, Netaji's military secretary, remembered that the Japanese emissary to whom he conveyed his leader's refusal suggested that they both commit harakiri. I've heard this story from Prem Saigal myself. The Japanese Foreign Office has an account which I'll come to. Saigal politely declined the suicide pact, humorously, along with the decoration for his leader. The Japanese Foreign Office tells us in their record that Netaji said, when the independence of India became a reality, he would be glad to receive it, the award, along with his followers. For the time being, he would like to set it aside. Would not this incident and the other one in case of Shibusawa's presence recorded before, the Japanese account comments, reveal the very essence of his character? Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose traveled to Tokyo on his third and final visit on October 29, 1944, with Muhammad Zaman Kiani, A.C. Chatterjee, and Habibur Rahman, and spent a month in Japan. He held talks with the new Prime Minister, Kuniaki Koisu, Foreign Minister Mamoru Shigemitsu, and was received by Emperor Hirohito on November 6, 1944. Even if Japan is defeated, he told his followers, we shall fight for India's independence till the end. He lectured at Hibiya Hall and delivered a major, wide-ranging address to the faculty and students of Tokyo Imperial University. He argued that a regional order had to be the foundation of a world order. The League of Nations had failed because of the selfish and short-sighted policies of the sponsor nations, particularly Britain and France. If such selfishness and short-sightedness could be abjured in Asia, and the sponsor nation could work on a moral basis, the experiment to build a new international order may well succeed. He saw the challenge to rise to a high level of morality to be the task not just for leaders and politicians, but rather youths and the students. Having got the Japanese to send an ambassador, Teruo Hachiya, to his Azad Hind government, he commenced his return journey to Southeast Asia on November 29, 1944. On January 10, 1945, Netaji was back at the war front in Burma. On April 24, 1945, Netaji, along with the men and women of the Indian National Army, began an epic retreat on foot from Burma to Thailand. The movement sought to regroup in Thailand, Malaya, and Singapore until the atom bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in August 1945 brought the war in Asia to an abrupt end. Once the warrior hero laid down his life for his country's freedom, his mortal remains found a peaceful resting place in a Buddhist temple in Japan. It was just a matter of a few months before Netaji and the INA turned their military defeat in Southeast Asia into a spectacular political victory in India. His friend Dilip Kumar Roy vividly describes how Subhash's suddenly amplified figure added to the romance of an Indian National Army marching, singing to Delhi, galvanized a frustrated nation out of its torpor, and substantially damaged the insulation of the Indian Army from the magnetic currents of popular enthusiasm for immediate independence. On November 5, 1945, a trial by court-martial began of 3 INA officers, Prem Kumar Saigal, Shahnawaz Khan, and Gurbaksh Singh Dhillon, at Delhi's historic Red Fort. A groundswell of popular support emerged for the Hindu, Muslim, and Sikh soldiers who faced the weighty charge of waging war against the King Emperor. Accounts of the heroic fight for freedom filled the pages of the Indian press. The masterful lead defense lawyer Bhulabhai Desai argued that the INA had waged war under a duly constituted government and in accordance with international law. If a subject people could not take up arms to throw off a foreign yoke, he contended, there would be nothing but perpetual slavery. On December 31st, 1945, the Red Fort III was sentenced to deportation for life, just as the last Mughal emperor, Bahadur Shah Zafar, had been in 1858. 3 days later, on January 3rd, 1946, the British Commander-in-Chief, Claude Auchinleck, was forced to release them to a tumultuous welcome from the Indian public. Among the dozen witnesses presented by the defense were 5 Japanese diplomats and generals. I cannot forget the cheering crowds of Indians that night. A defense witness, Major General Tudashi Katakura, recalled when the INA officers were vindicated and released. In December 1967, Netaji's sword was taken on a visit to Delhi's Red Fort. I traveled in the train with my father on that memorable journey. I watched in wonder as huge crowds gathered at Patna, Mughal Sarai, Allahabad, Kanpur, Ghaziabad, and smaller wayside stations as the relic wound its way across the Gangetic Plain. From Delhi station, the sword was taken in a gigantic procession to the Red Fort, with thousands of people lining the streets and showering flowers from balconies and treetops along the way. The sword was received in the Diwani arm by President Zakir Hussain, Vice President V.V. Giri, and Prime Minister Indira Gandhi. So many of us who knew Netaji have assembled here today, Indira Gandhi said, with hearts laden with emotion. His slogan was "Onward to Delhi." He himself could not reach Delhi, but his sword has come here today, and we welcome it warmly. I can still remember when we were young and we looked into his inspired eyes, our hearts also filled up with fervor. We can therefore well understand how and with what fervor he organized the Azad Hind Fauj. Netaji's Cambridge friend C.C. Desai, MP, lamented, if only he was with us from 1945 to 1947, the history of this country might well have been different. He was held in greater esteem by the Muslims, particularly by the Muslims of India and Mr. Jinnah, than perhaps, and I do not want to say a disparaging word about anybody, any other leader, Congress or otherwise. And if he was concerned with the independence and the fashioning of the future of India, things might have been different. Another close associate of Netaji, Hari Vishnu Kamath MP, asserted, in world history, and particularly during World War II, there is none to equal his role as a warrior, philosopher, and statesman at the same time. He reminded the Red Fort audience of the strains of the war song of Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose and his gallant Azad Hind Fauj. Let me close then with those immortal lines that can inspire our quest for freedom, even today. Chalo Dehli pukar ke, qawmi nishan sambhal ke, lal kile pe gaadh ke, लहराए जा चलो दिल्ली पुकार के कौमी निशान संभाल के लाल किले पे गाड़ के लहराए जा कदम कदम बढ़ाए जा, खुशी के गीत गाए जा, ये जिंदगी है कौम की, तू कौम पे लुटाए जा, कदम कदम बढ़ाए जा, तू शेर हिंद आगे बढ़, मरने से फिर भी तू न डर, उड़ा के दुश्मनों का सर, जो शे वतन बढ़ाए जा, कदम कदम बढ़ाए जा, कदम कदम बढ़ाए जा, चलो दिल्ली पुकार के, कौमी निशान संभाल के, लाल किले पे गाढ़ के, लहराए जा, कदम कदम बढ़ाए जा, कदम कदम बढ़ाए जा, कदम कदम बढ़ाए जा। जय हिंद।
We are now approaching the end of our program, but we have a finale befitting of Netaji's 125th birth anniversary. Most of you will remember the fabulous musical tribute to Netaji performed by T.M. Krishna and his colleagues in this auditorium just 2 years ago, 23rd January 2020. The Netaji Pavilion was packed and overflowing, and I sat in the front row next of the audience, next to my mother, as T.M. Krishna enthralled us from this dais for almost 2 hours. For Netaji's 125th, T.M. Krishna's students have prepared a rendering of Subha Sukha Chainaki, the Azad Hind movement's anthem in Southeast Asia from 1943 to 1945, which is known as the Qaumi Tarana. The 3 men involved in writing the lyrics of the Qaumi Tarana and setting it to music in 1943 were Abid Hassan, Mumtaz Hussain, and Ram Singh Thakur. T.M. Krishna students have prepared a rendering of Subha Sukha Chainaki, the Azad Hind anthem, the Qaumi Tarana, in its original 1943 notation. They were looking forward to coming here from Chennai to perform live, but we will have to make do with a recording. The following artists have performed in the rendering of the Azad Hind anthem that you are about to hear. Piano, Rijul Chakravarti. Vocals, Aditya Prakash, Aditya Narayanan Shankar, Bhargavi Venkatram, Emmanuel Martin, Rithwik Raja, Shruti Ravali Manda, Tanmay Krishnamurti, Vidya Raghavan, Vignesh Ishwar, Vignesh Krishnamurti, and Vikram Raghavan. Mix and master, Aditya Narayanan Shankar.
शुभ सुख चैन की बरखा बरसे, भारत भाग है जागा। पंजाब सिंध गुजरात मराठा द्राविड़ उत्कल बंगा, चंचल सागर विंध्य हिमाला, नीला जमुना गंगा। तेरे गुण गाए तुझसे सब तन पाए आशा। सूरज बन कर जग पर चमके भारत नाम सुभागा। सूरज बन कर जग पर चमके भारत नाम सुभागा। जय हो जय हो जय हो जय 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 हो। भारत नाम सुभागा। सबके दिल में प्रेम भाषाएं तेरी मीठी बानी। हर सूबे के रहने वाले हर मजहब के प्राणी। सभी को फर्क मिटा के सब में तेरी आंखें गूंजे प्रेम की माला। सूरज बन कर जग पर चमके भारत नाम सुभागा। जय हो जय हो जय हो जय 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 हो। भारत नाम सुभागा। सुबह सवेरे पंख पखेरुते ही गुण गाए। बस भरी भरपूर हवाएं जीवन में रुत लाए। सब मिलकर हिंद पुकारे जय आज़ाद हिंद के नारे। प्यारा देश हमारा। सूरज बन कर जग पर चमके भारत नाम सुभागा। जय हो जय हो जय हो जय 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 हो। भारत नाम सुभागा।
Jai Hind.
তাহলে